was strolling on the moon one day in the merry, merry month of December. Now, May's the month. May, that's right. May is the year of the month. When, much to my surprise, a pair of bunny eyes. That's the truth.
It was from here that men and women, propelled by sheer nerve and talent, set about pushing the boundaries of humanity's reach. That's the story of NASA, and it's a story that started a little more than half a century ago, far from the space coast in a remote and desolate region of what is now called Kazakhstan. As a nation, we set about meeting that goal, reaping rewards that have, in the decades since, touched every facet of our lives. NASA was at the forefront. Many gave their careers to the effort. Some have given far more.
For over 50 years, space exploration has risen to become one of man's most notable accomplishments. It's interesting how two countries obsessed with destroying each other with bombs sparked a new generation of space exploration. Without the unfortunate events of World War II or the Cold War, NASA would not be able to stretch its arms into space the way they can today.
Seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
NASA has sent men to walk on the moon. They have sent ships to the farthest reaches of the solar system. They have invented hundreds of innovative devices we all use. They are loved and respected the world over. They were formed after the Second World War, in an age of rapid human technological advancement. For thousands of years, mankind had remained in pretty much the same state, until the 20th century. Then, suddenly, we took to the skies. We created machines to think for us. We devised weapons of mass destruction, and we made plastic. The scientific advancement we enjoy now in the 21st century came from somewhere, and it came in line with one peculiar event: the global sightings of UFOs. Around the world, UFOs appeared in the skies, and man began to wonder. Then, in 1936, one of them crashed in Germany. Hitler ordered a full-scale investigation. The Nazis started to make their own. Together with their work on the occult, they had a vague understanding of what we call today quantum physics. All sides in the war experienced the phenomena we call the Foo Fighter. The Nazis rapidly advanced in technology. At the end of the war, Operation Paperclip saw the extraction of Nazi scientists who had the knowledge. Sightings of UFOs grew year after year. One crashed at Roswell, and within 10 years, NASA was born. America rapidly advanced in technology. Now, decades later, hundreds of whistleblowers claim that NASA not only know about alien visitations, but that they are in contact with them. Evidence of artifacts on the Moon and Mars has brought huge debate among the scientific community. Astronauts have been told to remain silent, and yet the whistleblowers grow in numbers. We investigate the government cover-up of the UFO phenomena and reveal some startling new evidence. It's time to go where no man has gone before. NASA is one of the most highly respected and loved institutions on the planet. Full to the brim of heroes, behind the scenes and in the public eye. They have walked on the Moon, placed incredible satellites in orbit, sent spaceships to the edges of the solar system, and invented hundreds of highly advanced items we now use every day in our homes. They have taken us to places no man has gone before and shown us the wonder of the universe. And yet, only 60 years before they even existed, Victoria was on the throne of the British Empire. The Boer War was going strong, and nobody had even taken off the ground in a powered aeroplane. How did mankind, in such a short space of time, manage to put a man on the Moon? For thousands and thousands of years, man lived a life that was the same. A man living in 1000 AD lived pretty much the same life to that of a man living in 4000 BC. But then man entered the 20th century and it all changed. Why? We can only answer this by traveling back in time to the Second World War and the origins of NASA. Close to the end of the Second World War, the Allies were increasingly becoming aware that Nazi Germany was developing extraordinary technology. The days of propeller-driven fighter planes were rapidly becoming a thing of the past. Now, new rocket technology was merging with sophisticated guidance systems.
Illustrative of Germany's progress in aviation is the rocket jet plane Me-160P, introduced to combat in the summer of 1944. These captured German films present an interesting study of the plane. External features of the Me-163 are short, squat fuselage, sharply swept-back wings, and its single fin and rudder without tailplane or elevator. Tremendous jet thrust makes takeoff very fast. After takeoff, the undercarriage is jettisoned to save weight, for the Me-63 is a short-range airplane in which all is sacrificed to permit a fast-climbing single attack and breakaway. Rate of climb is 10,000 feet a minute. Low-grade fuel creates long white contrails. Speed varies in flight from 150 to 600 miles an hour. Endurance at full speed is limited to 8 minutes, but gliding between short bursts increases flight duration to about an hour. Retractable skid is used for landing. The skid provides a method of braking, and landing can be made even on an unprepared field. Since the Germans probably passed on their plans for jet propulsion to Japan, It's possible that similar planes will appear in the Pacific. Speed of the Me-163 impaired its maneuverability. Our fighters could turn inside them and generally outfought them, as the following gun-sight aiming point camera pictures show.
Even during the war, hundreds of tales of the infamous Foo Fighters emerged. These were strange lights seen to dance almost intelligently around planes on all sides of the conflict. Many were dismissed, but many more were in fact being taken seriously by scientists. At the very top level, Allied intelligence suspected these were in fact the advanced technology possessed by the Germans. The Germans thought the same of the Allies. In some cases, Foo Fighters even caused physical damage to Allied planes. There were in fact a great many sightings of UFOs during the war. In Pennsylvania in 1939, a large so-called jet airline was spotted without wings. In the same year in Wisconsin, a large egg shape was spotted through a telescope. In England, a large bell-shaped object appeared following a strange buzzing sound. In 1940, 5 large disc shapes were seen in the US flying off into the clouds. In Scotland, anti-aircraft gunners trained their weapons on a disc object. In 1941, a pastor was called to give the last rites to several crash victims. He later described them as not human. The list goes on and on, with balls, bells, discs, and cigar-shaped objects. Many have unusual lights and move around like nothing ever seen before. The sightings are not just in the US, they appear worldwide, from China to Holland, from Japan to Russia. Many believe that in our darkest hour, aliens were monitoring events. Some believe they were also taking part. Nobody is sure, and all governments are silent on the events. An in-depth study of the sightings can filter out known aircraft and known test craft. Zeppelins, for instance, can be considered to be cigar-shaped, but they don't move hundreds of miles per hour, and they certainly don't shoot off into the clouds at right angles. Any filter leaves behind hundreds of sightings that are quite simply unexplainable from the perspective of human technology. At the end of the war, the Allies introduced Operation Paperclip. Leading Nazi scientists, working on everything from medical experimentation to rockets, were extracted and taken away to the USA. Many would later find themselves working for NASA. Then, in 1947, sightings of UFOs began emerging in the US. The Air Force set up Project Sign to investigate. They showed how many of the UFOs actually appeared to look like the flying wing of the German Horten brothers, even though the US had already flown their own version in 1946.
The Northrop Flying Wing stands ready for the long-awaited test flight at Inglewood, California. Test pilot Max Stanley and his crew go aboard. The climax of 7 years of engineering research is at hand for the 25-ton monster, and it's contact. The Four 3,000 horsepower motors turn the coaxial propellers of the 25-ton Giant. Pilots have expressed amazement that the tailless craft has precisely the same flight characteristics as conventional models. With slow, almost lazy grace, the 172 feet of wing is airborne. 15 sister ships are under construction for the Army, which will use them as bombers. Fully loaded, they will weigh 50 tons. The flight engineer is a busy man during the test flight. A radical change in design and a new chapter in the steady march of aviation comes forward to challenge the imagination.
War, both the Germans and Italian scientists had in fact been working on flying discs. He strangely stated that some great power is launching discs to study them, whatever that meant. In 1953, Avro Canada began developing a disc-shaped aircraft that could reach speeds of 1,500 miles per hour. They called it the Avrocar. German engineers claimed that they had already done so, and that Avro had simply stolen the idea. In 1965, a bell-shaped craft crashed in Pennsylvania. Many related this to the German Bellcraft of the war that was supposedly developed. Little real evidence exists, but it is stated that the energy system was some form of occult anti-gravity system. In the same month as the crash, German scientist Rudolf Schriever claimed that he had designed a 15-meter diameter disc-shaped craft at the BMW Prague Works in 1945. He was convinced that the blueprints had been stolen by Czechs and built the craft for, as he said, a foreign power. Aeronautical engineer Roy Fedden remarked, "I've seen enough of their designs and production plans to realise that if they, the Germans, had managed to prolong the war some months longer, we would have been confronted with a set of entirely new and deadly developments in air warfare." Any historian of the Second World War will tell you that the Germans were amazing engineers. They developed a machine or device for almost everything. When retreating from Russia, they even made a machine to rip up the rail tracks as the trains sped along. But historians of the Nazis will also tell you that, at the very highest level, they had occult beliefs in strange powers. Decades later, and scientists started to come to a realization that there were, in fact, some strange powers previously unthought of, and they developed quantum physics. The concepts of quantum physics can seem quite bizarre. It reveals how particles can be in more places than one at any given time, and that this can be affected by simply observing. A particle may at any given time appear to be a particle or a wave. Particles seem to travel instantly over any distance, evading Einstein's claim that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. There are no certainties on how a particle will react. They call this the uncertainty principle. It states that when observing a particle, the observer brings a probability wave or state of mind to the observation and affects the particle. By simply measuring, we are giving the measurement. Because of all these bizarre concepts, theorists have gone crazy with all manner of ideas about multiple universes and such. It begins to merge with the world of the occult. The ability to stop observing existence from a human perspective and to go free with the mind may in fact open a quantum realm to consciousness. It has been something that man has known about for millennia. He just didn't have the modern scientific terminology for it. The world of the occult, quantum physics, and the conscious mind of man merge in many ways. Particles are affected not just by observing them, but by thinking about observing them. The Nazis were convinced that mankind's ancestors had worked out ways of tapping into this universal power, and they hunted it out for use as a weapon of world domination. From the 1960s, many writers were coming to the conclusion that the Nazis had in fact almost broken the code to understanding the power of what they called Vril. And in so doing, they had called upon forces even they were not expecting. Aliens. In order to understand this properly, we have to stop thinking in the standard way. We have to stop expecting aliens to only land in great craft and ask to see our leaders. Instead, travel across space and indeed time can be possible in a quantum world, or a world of that occult power the Nazis sought. Tapping into this power may in fact be like opening a channel on a two-way radio, but in this case, to another world. Such peculiar energy could also be an explanation for the emergence of the Foo Fighter during the war. Grand-scale particles of light that move around in ways impossible for ordinary aircraft in the standard model of physics. But where did the Nazis get this knowledge from? Was it the pressure to win the war for their Führer? Or had they discovered another source? Hitler came to full power in 1933 with his occult-enthused henchmen. Quickly, Germany began to build its forces, and men were sent out around the world to seek out occult artifacts and icons to grow the hidden power of the Reich. Germany was becoming the world's first superpower. Then, in 1936, after years of occult scientific research, something peculiar happened. A flying saucer crashed in the German countryside near the Black Forest. The German army quickly recovered the remains, and that was the last anybody heard. Immediately, the High Command and Hitler himself were informed of the discovery. A full investigation was ordered. The ship was moved to a location near the Rhine, and other parts to a secret base near the Austrian border. A team was assembled to investigate and reverse engineer the craft, and included members of the Luftwaffe, scientists, engineers, and professors. Among them were the Horten brothers, who would later design the flying wing that many thought was a UFO. They also supposedly invented the first stealth jet fighter. One expert was Victor Schauberger, who invented the imploder motor that powered the Bell ship and supposedly created rifts in space-time. The crashed ship was made from materials unknown to all the scientists, and they struggled to replicate it in the lab. Hitler ordered the technology to be utilized in the war effort, and no expense was spared. But time was running out for the Nazis. And although they did manage to make a flying saucer, it was unstable, and the war ended before they could complete their work. Much of the blame was placed on their inability to recreate the metal from the crashed ship. Modern steel was too heavy and aluminium too soft. They did eventually mix aluminium with magnesium. Documents found after the war show that Polish slave workers created a manufacturing base for the flying disc weaponry, including one called Ball Lightning. Hitler and Himmler both witnessed test flights. It was said they could achieve speeds in excess of 1,250 miles per hour and were very maneuverable. A powerful electrostatic field was emitted, causing instruments on other aircraft to malfunction and even cause burns on animals. This kind of peculiar burn on cattle and farm animals has been reported worldwide ever since. Hitler told his people that he had a secret weapon, one so powerful that the entire world would surrender before him. But he ran out of time and shot himself in his bunker in Berlin.
Nazi Germany's prize secret, the deadly V-2 rocket bomb, is assembled by U.S. engineers for testing. Rivaling the atom bomb in importance, the 46 feet of death and destruction is set in place by an ingenious elevating boom at White Sands Proving Ground near Las Cruces, New Mexico. Parts to make up 100 V-2s were brought from Germany, and Proving Ground officers are carrying on experiments involving war and peace uses. In this test, the warhead is replaced by scientific instruments, and a concrete blockhouse with walls 10 feet thick and a roof 27 feet thick houses the control personnel and the firing mechanism. The monster is in place, and here she goes, as shown by the slow-motion camera. Climbing 75 miles above the jagged peaks of the Organ Mountains, the great guided missile is directed and the results recorded by radio, radar, photographic, and visual equipment. 60 seconds after leaving the ground, the rocket can attain a top speed of 3,000 miles per hour. In this case, the flight was controlled, as viewed through a tracking device. But the future use of rocket power knows no limits.
Now the Allies moved in. The secrets were gathered up and taken away. Scientists and engineers were given new names and new homes in America. Area 51 was born. Roswell saw an infamous UFO crash, and later, in 1958, NASA emerged in the race to space. Strangely, one of the influential figures in the creation of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, strongly linked with NASA, was a man called Jack Parsons. But before he was a rocket engineer, he was in fact a member of Aleister Crowley's occult group, the Ordo Templi Orientis. Here, he met and worked with the creator of the Scientologists, L. Ron Hubbard, and together they called upon the goddess Babylon to come down to Earth. This is the same man that is held in high esteem for his scientific knowledge of rocket propulsion. He died in 1952 in an explosion that many see as more than an accident. In 2002, a man called Gary McKinnon hacked secret US government files looking for evidence of the UFO cover-up he believed existed. In an interview with AncientX.com, he stated, "One of these people was a NASA photographic expert, and she said that in Building 8 of Johnson Space Center, they regularly airbrushed out images of UFOs from the high-resolution satellite imaging. What she said was there. There were folders called filtered and unfiltered, processed and raw, something like that. I got one picture out of the folder, and bear in mind this is a 56K dial-up, so a very slow internet connection in dial-up days. Using the remote control program, I turned the color down to 4-bit color, and the screen resolution really low. And even then the picture was still juddering as it came onto the screen. But what came on the screen was amazing. It was a culmination of all my effort. It was a picture of something that definitely wasn't man-made. It was above the Earth's hemisphere. It kind of looked like a satellite. It was cigar-shaped, and it had geodesic domes above, below, to the left, the right, and both ends of it. And although it was a really low-resolution picture, it was very close up. This thing was hanging in space, the Earth's hemisphere visible below it, and no rivets, no seams, none of the stuff associated with normal man-made manufacturing. Could it be that what McKinnon is saying is true? Are NASA covering up knowledge of UFOs? Well, the facts are simple. NASA have sent up a lot of astronauts, and so have other agencies now, such as the European Space Agency, the Russians and Chinese. In all cases, there have been reports from these highly trained intellectual astronauts that they have seen things they cannot explain. Indeed, there is in fact a lot of footage in the public domain, taken by NASA equipment showing such things as strange shapes, lights, and even peculiar serpent movements in our atmosphere. If NASA and the Air Force have for decades been working on technology found by the Nazis, then there will by now be a lot of unknown flying objects out there controlled by humans. The question is this: are there any out there that are not? One crew member of the Apollo 14 mission, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, believes so, and has in fact come out in public with his beliefs. He said that NASA knows all about the aliens and even deals with them. He even describes them as little white humans. He said,
"I happen to be privileged enough to be in on the fact that we've been visited on this planet and the UFO phenomena is real. It's been well covered up by our governments for the last 60 or so years, but slowly it's leaked out and some of us have been privileged to have been briefed on some of it. I've been in military and intelligence circles who know that beneath the surface of what has been public knowledge, yes, we have been visited."
NASA have in fact been covering up for a long time. In 1975, a book, now out of print, called Our Mysterious Spaceship Moon, revealed astronaut conversations about things they discovered when on the moon itself. This is what was said in 1972 during the Apollo 16 mission.
"Man, John, I tell you, this is some sight here. Tony, the blocks in Buster are covered. The bottom is covered with blocks, 5 meters across. Besides, the blocks seem to be in a preferred orientation, northeast to southwest. They go all the way up the wall on those two sides, and on the other side you can barely see the outcropping at about 5%. 90% of the bottom is covered with blocks that are 50 centimeters and larger." Capcom. Good show. Sounds like a secondary. Right out here, the blue one that I just grabbed from the lunar module window is colored because it's glass coated, but underneath the glass it is crystalline. The same texture as the Genesis rock, dead on my mark. Yeah. Mark, it's open. I can't believe it. And I put that beauty in dry. Dover. We'll start EVA 2 immediately. You'd better send a couple more guys up here. They'll have to try to... Sounds familiar. Boy, I tell you, these emus and PLSSs are really super fantastic.
NASA later admitted that not every discovery on the moon was made public and still hasn't. In a later Apollo 17 mission of the same year, the crew are ordered to go into code with the word Kilo.
CMP, Command Module Pilot. Hey, I see a bright spot down there on the landing site where there might have been blowing off some of that halo stuff. Capcom. Roger. Interesting. Very. Go to Kilo. CMP. Hey, it's gray now with the number 1 extends. Roger, we got it. And we copy that it's all on the way down there. Roger, we got it. And we copy that it's all on the way down there. Go to Kilo on that. Motor's going to HM. Recorder is off. Lose a little communication there, huh? Okay, that's Bravo. Bravo select Omni. Hey, you know you'll never believe it. I'm right over the edge of Orientail. Just looking down and saw the light flash again. Roger, understand. Right at the end of the Ryle. Any chances of that's the east of Orientail? You don't suppose it could be Vostok? A Russian probe.
Whatever it was that the Apollo 17 crew saw, we can only now guess at. But if it's being compared to a Russian probe, then it simply must have looked man-made. There are in fact many recorded conversations with codes in. We can only wonder at what such words as structure, beaches, benches and terraces really mean. Earlier, the Apollo 15 mission found actual tracks on the moon to which NASA has never given an answer. Here's what was said.
Irwin. Tracks here as we go down the slope. MC. Just follow the tracks, huh? Irwin. Right. We know that's a fairly good run. We're bearing 320. Hitting range for 413. I can't get over these lineations. That layering on Mount Hadley. Scott. I can't either. That's really spectacular. Irwin. They sure look beautiful. Scott. Talk about organization. Irwin. That's the most organized structure I've ever seen. It's so uniform in width. Nothing we've seen before this has shown such uniform thickness from the top of the tracks to the bottom.
The crew then saw something spectacular.
You talked about something mysterious. Okay, Gordy, when we pitched around, I'd like to tell you about something we saw. When we were coming about 30 or 40 feet out, there were a lot of objects, white things, flying by. It looked as if they were being propelled or ejected, but I'm not convinced of that. We copy that, Charlie.
Even on the very first moon landing of Apollo 11, there was an amazing sighting. According to Otto Binder, a member of the then NASA space team, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong saw alien craft. He claims that Armstrong clutched Aldrin's arm and exclaimed,
"What was that? What the hell was it? That's all I want to know. What's there? Malfunction. Mission control calling Apollo 11. These babies were huge, sir. Enormous. Oh, God, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecraft out there. lined up on the far side of the crater edge. They're on the moon watching us.
A conversation heard around the world by hundreds of amateur radio operators and later covered up goes like this.
Armstrong and Aldrin. Those are giant things. No. This is not an optical illusion. No one is going to believe this. Houston, what the hell is happening? What's wrong with you? They're under the surface. What's there? Emission interrupted. Interference control calling Apollo 11. We saw some visitors. They were here for a while, observing the instruments. Repeat your last information. I say that there were other spaceships that lined up in the other side of the crater. Repeat. Let us sound this orbiter. In 625 to 5. Automatic relay connected. My hands are shaking so badly I can't do anything. Film it. God, if these damn cameras have picked up anything, what then? Have you picked up anything? I didn't have any film I hand. 3 shots of the saucers, or whatever they were ruining the film. Control here. Are you on your way? What is the uproar with UFOs over? They've landed here. There they are, and they're watching us. The mirrors. Have you set them up? Yes, they're in the right place, but whoever made those spaceships surely can come tomorrow and remove them. Over and out.
Of course, what these US astronauts were seeing could have been Russian, couldn't they? Well, if they were, then the Russians would know about it. But in April of 1979, cosmonaut Viktor Afanasiev saw something he couldn't explain when he docked with the Soviet space station. Here is what he said.
It followed us during half of our orbit. We observed it on the light side, and when we entered the shadow side, it disappeared completely. It was an engineering structure, made from some type of metal, approximately 40 meters long within a hull. The object was narrow here and wider there, and inside there were openings. Some places had projections like small wings. The object stayed very close to us. We photographed it, and our photos showed it to be 23 to 28 meters away.
The photos were never released. Maurice Chatelain was a former NASA communications chief. He said,
"The encounter was common knowledge at NASA. All Apollo and Gemini fighters were followed by space vehicles of extraterrestrial origin, or UFOs if you prefer to call them that. Every time it occurred, the astronauts informed Mission Control, who then ordered absolute silence. I think Walter Scherer aboard Mercury 8 was the first astronaut to use the codename Santa Claus to indicate the presence of UFOs. But it was James Lovell on board the Apollo 8 command module who came out from behind the moon and said for everybody to hear, 'Please be informed that there is a Santa Claus.' Even though this happened on Christmas Day 1968, many people sensed a hidden meaning in those words."
Ben Rich was the CEO of Lockheed Skunk Works and was called the father of the stealth fighter bomber. The MUFON UFO Journal revealed some startling new evidence about what he knew.
It appears that on his deathbed in 1995, Rich confirmed that aliens were real, that they had visited the Earth, and that the US military actually travels in space.
The actual revelation itself came from Tom Keller, an aerospace engineer and once system analyst for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Skunk Works is Lockheed's secret research laboratory, and Keller claims that he was one of 50 or so engineers making secret technology for highly secretive missions. He states that the US already have the ability to travel among the stars in black projects. As we suspected, Keller confirms that such travel does not use chemical propulsion in the standard model. When he was asked how such technology worked, he replied, "Let me ask you, how does ESP work?" The questioner answered, "All points in time and space are connected." Keller replies, "That's how it works." In essence, what we discussed about the mind and quantum physics is confirmed by what Keller says. Apparently, Ben Rich, the former CEO of Lockheed Skunk Works, confirmed to witnesses that there were two kinds of UFOs. Humans designed one, based on various crash site retrievals such as the one at Roswell. We were also given actual craft by aliens to work on. The second kind of UFO is the real McCoy, alien technology. He claimed that the US government handed over control of the information about this human and alien cooperation to an international board of directors. Ben Rich believed that it was not in the public interest to know about such things. "We couldn't handle the truth," he said. Don Phillips was in the US Air Force and worked at Skunk Works. He has since come out with revelations about UFOs. He said the UFOs were huge, would come to a stop and do 60-degree turns and immediately reverse action. These are statements that thousands of UFO eyewitnesses around the world will recognize today, and it is the kind of movement impossible for known human craft. What was it that Neil Armstrong and others saw on the moon all those years ago? And why does NASA refuse to explain statements like this from Neil Armstrong as the Apollo landed on the surface of the moon?
They're here. They are right over there, and looking at the size of those ships, it is obvious they don't like us being here.
Now, of course, NASA have been further than the moon. They are on Mars. A quick search of the internet will bring up dozens of UFOologists pointing out images from NASA craft that have unusual features, shapes, even lights. There is evidence the pictures have been altered. A registered and certified geologist called Ronald Hicks examines the Martian pictures in detail. He states that much of what we see are not in fact ordinary rocks, but artifacts. When you walk through a desert, he said, you may find a rock in the shape of a circle, or one like a triangle, or another shaped like a rectangle. But you won't find one with all the shapes on it. These, he says, must be made by intelligent hands, and are therefore artifacts. He enlarged pictures from Mars and revealed how these shapes could be clearly seen. Right angles, tubes, wheels, and even cogs. Phobos is a moon of Mars and has been studied and photographed. One image made everybody sit up, including the scientists. Dr. Fred Singer used to advise Eisenhower on space developments. He studied the pictures, and he suggested that Phobos, instead of being a natural moon, might in fact be an artificially created satellite. From the artifacts on Mars and this new image, it is easy to draw a conclusion that there was once an ancient civilization on that remote planet. Singer wasn't alone. The Russian astrophysicist Shklovsky also stated that Phobos was probably a hollow, artificial satellite, and for him proved that Mars had once been occupied. His reason for this? An extensive study of the orbit of Phobos around Mars proved that it was not an ordinary object. The evidence stacks up. the once chief of applied mathematics at NASA, Raymond H. Wilson Jr., stated that Phobos might in fact be a colossal base orbiting Mars. What was in the pictures of Phobos? A monolith on such a vast scale that it can be seen from space. Buzz Aldrin was the second man to walk on the moon, as far as we know. When speaking on a US cable TV show, he said that we ought to visit the moons of Mars because of the monolith. When people find out about it, he said, they're going to ask, who put that there? Well, who did? NASA remains silent. Strangely, the Mars orbiter also found a huge monolith on Mars as well. So, we have astronauts saying they have seen flying ships, lights, and strange buildings on the moon. We have craft that have crashed and been spirited away by military personnel. We have sudden spikes in the rise of technology following thousands of years of relative similarity. We have huge monoliths, strange shapes, and artifacts on Mars and its moon. And all the time, we have silence from NASA. Well, not quite all of NASA. Dr. Brian O'Leary, a former NASA astronaut and Princeton professor of physics, said, "There is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have been visiting us for a very long time, that their appearance is bizarre from any type of traditional materialistic Western point of view, that these visitors use the technologies of consciousness, they use toroids, they use co-rotating magnetic disks for their propulsion systems. That seems to be common denominator of the UFO phenomenon. And not just ex-NASA employees. Here's what the former Canadian Defence Minister, Paul Hellyer, said. Decades ago, visitors from other planets warned us about the direction we were heading and offered to help. Instead, some of us interpreted their visits as a threat and decided to shoot first and ask questions after. It is ironic that the US should be fighting monstrously expensive wars, allegedly to bring democracy to those countries, when it itself can no longer claim to be called a democracy, when trillions, and I mean thousands of billions of dollars, have been spent on black projects which both Congress and the Commander-in-Chief have been kept deliberately in the dark. There have now been hundreds of whistleblowers, people who have worked for government and corporations and who refused to remain silent. Most of these people are not crazy fools. Most of these people are professionals with degrees, doctorates, and are in positions of authority. We believe it's time for disclosure. Stop treating us like fools. Stop talking about little green men and belittling the search for life out there. We're big grown-ups now, and we are more than ready to meet their leaders.